The Green Ops podcast is brought to you by F3 Tactical, Spotter Up, Sons of Liberty Gunworks, and Blue Force Gear.
Not only the gear integration part of it, but navigating those different social aspects. That's kind of how this all came about. The two things that I'm arguably most famous for are, number one, I'm the only person I know of that talks publicly about getting fired over violating a company weapons policy. And other than that, just kind of angrily shrieking at dudes to pull up their pants and wear them at the right height. So those are kind of my staples. But once I met my wife in the early stages of our relationship, we were that couple of you look at her and go, why in the hell is she with him?
Right.
Because some of the early photos were honestly downright embarrassing. Just I looked like I was still in college. Baggy ass cargo shorts, graphic T-shirts, just kind of unkempt. And I realized that it was a poor reflection on her. And I was like, well, I'm sure as hell never going to be able to do any better. So I probably ought to kind of clean this act up before she realizes how much better than me she is.
Yeah. Time to straighten up shop at that point.
Yeah. But the challenge was, like every millennial, I resorted to the internet to kind of educate myself on the subject. And the problem was a lot of the material that was out there, much like with gun content, they were simply the what without the how and the why. It was, well, do this, wear this, here's an outfit. I would try some of that and it felt like a costume. I mean, it felt awkward, but I couldn't quantify why. Finally, I came across a fellow by the name of Tanner Guzzi, who really was able to distill it down into his style archetypes, which are the rugged, the refined, and the rakish. And just very high level, rugged is Indiana Jones, refined is James Bond, rakish is Captain Jack Sparrow. And everybody is some combination of those three. But once you understand kind of what fits with your personality, then you are able to elevate your style without it feeling inauthentic, because most people think, oh, well, dressing up is just putting on a shirt with a collar or a tie or a jacket. But that's not necessarily the case. And that's one of the things that I really try to hammer home is the distinction between dressing up, which is you dress up for Halloween. That's when you're wearing a costume, or dressing well, which is simply doing it with a little bit of care, thought, and attention. So that's the delineation between the two.
So it's very funny that I've kind of stumbled upon you and your style and some of your like the tips that you throw out on Instagram and on YouTube and things like that. My first job as a 16-year-old kid was working at a suit store. So okay. I've always been into I don't know that it was fashion back then, but I always liked looking good. And, I never dressed down per se. Sure. Great example. About a month ago, my wife and I went out someplace. I went in like shorts and a t-shirt and sandals. And she said, when we met almost 15 years ago, I would have never thought I would see you out in public in a t-shirt. Like I was the guy that had a collared shirt wherever I went at minimum, whether it be a button down or just like a golf polo. And so now as I'm getting older, maybe I've got kids and it's like, yeah, well, sometimes you just have to punt just to get out the door.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing is that there's ways to do that and still look put together, because what people don't realize is the most critical piece of it is fit. Like it doesn't matter if it's a $5 t-shirt or a $5,000 custom suit. If it fits you well, that's the critical piece. And the really cool thing about it is if you understand the mechanics of clothing, it makes your concealment better and it makes it easier to spot other people's poor concealment. And the anecdote that I use for this is a few years back, my wife and I went to Vegas and we went to the Penn and Teller show, and we had real good seats. We were maybe 5-6 rows back from the stage. Every little sort of gimmick and hideaway, and they have built into their stage costumes, I could see them. And it took a little bit of the fun out of the act for me.
Right. Complete episode available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app. New Green Ops podcast episodes available every Thursday. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the new content.